Thank you. Barbs, can you just close the door?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is a Queer House takeover on her radio. It's a series, the second in a series. The first was with Amazon, Berlin versus Amazon, not with Amazon, not to be confused with Amazon. Berlin versus Amazon, talking about anti-tech gentrification in Berlin, and we're here today with Right to the City, continuing the discussion about anti-gentrification and much more coming up. So I will do a quick round of introductions, or we will do a quick round of introductions to explain a bit more about who Queer House is and who we all are. To begin, I'm Lou Drago. I'm a artist, writer, curator, activist based in Berlin, and I'm working with Right to the City, and previous collaborator of Pedro, who has invited me from Queer House. So yeah, without further ado, we can introduce the other guests. So, Barbs, you can start.
Hello, I'm Barbs. I'm part of Queer House. I'm one of the software developers working on Queer House. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, I am Adelaide. I am a poet from Brazil and I am a tenant in Berlin, suffering with the rent, but not only, we're also doing stuff against it.
Thank you for being here. So I'm Pedro Maroon, and I'm from Portugal. I live in Berlin. I work as an artist, DJ, curator, organizer, and I also do activist work with the Deutsche Wohnen, Co Enteignen, and Right to the City. And I've also been collaborating with Queer House since I don't remember, since kind of a year exactly, like when the pandemic really hit. That's when we started investing more time in this alternative, as also social media and the online space also took a bigger presence, even bigger presence in our lives, because we got stuck in front of our screens. And it's really nice to see also all these conversations here together at her, and to see the bridges that we can make with electronic music, anti-gentrification movements, artistic movements, and yeah, tech hacktivists. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for these introductions. Maybe before we go any further, for new listeners who maybe didn't catch the first episode in the series, you could give a brief introduction as to what is Queer House. Yeah, what do we need to know? Oh, and something I forgot before we go into that, sorry. Just to explain to the audience who are listening at home why we're not wearing masks, because we all got tested and some of us are vaccinated already. And last time, you know, removing masks all the time is kind of a pain, so we decided to go for the testing option. So, full transparency. Please don't cancel us. Okay. So, yeah, Barbs, please tell to us a bit about what is Queer House. Thank you.
Yeah, so Queer House is an alternative social media. We're a group of 5 people, queers here in Berlin, working to build our own little online space away from Instagram and away from corporate greed. And so it's a social space for queers, free from adverts and free from surveillance and monitoring, and it's a place where we can make our own rules for how we would like social media to be.
Maybe could you say a couple of things, like what are these rules that you create, and what are the main differences? Like, why would people choose to be on Queer House instead of Facebook or Twitter or something?
We're trying to create a safe space for queers, of course, and also a safe space for sex workers and anyone else that feels excluded by the policy that Facebook and Instagram has when it comes to posting nudity, posting all kinds of things that are not accepted by the US morality standards. So we are bringing the moderation and the community building closer to the community, instead of it being in the US decided by someone else. Yeah.
That's amazing. Did you want to add something, Pedro?
Yeah, maybe I'll just add, and thank you, Barbs. Can you hear me? I have no idea if like this is. I think it's working. Yeah, I think it's I was really excited about joining Queer House. Of course, like oftentimes the criticism that we receive is that a platform like this cannot tackle a platform as big as Facebook, but that's also not the idea. The idea is to really create alternatives, and we incentivize people to also create their own alternatives, and that's why Queer House also provides help if anyone wants to create their own social media. And then Barb's can talk a little bit more about how the platform works, but it's all open source, and people can create their own and somehow customize. And I guess like Queer House was birthed before the pandemic, but then it's with the pandemic a lot of changes, and also I think people became very sensitive to things that before people wouldn't care so much about. You know, people would just often say, I don't share anything relevant or precious or private on social media. But one of the things that is important to be aware is how the rules of social media change rapidly. And one day, yeah, Facebook is welcoming of people using their drag names or their chosen names, and the next day you're not free to use that anymore. Or people have been using social media also to promote their work, including like sex work, and then all of a sudden comes the law and swipes like the rights of this happening. And this is something that we've seen happening in a period that when people were their most vulnerable, when they only had social media to really reach out to clients and to friends. So I guess it's really important, like, to say that this is not a unique solution, but the idea is to create multiple, solutions, and people start creating their own social medias and regaining agency over how they communicate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that seems really clear, like especially for trans or drag queens, for example. This makes a lot of sense. But what about for other people who maybe don't, this classic argument that you mentioned of like, I don't have anything to hide, or I'm not doing anything wrong. They can look at everything. What kind of solution or like what response would you have for those people?
I guess it's even my parents this year or over the past year started realizing how much influence social media has over their lives. Even when everyone received the message on WhatsApp saying that they were going to kind of network all their systems, being like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and read the data to optimize and give you better responses, better advertisement. And I think over time people are realizing how scary this is, and how these companies are becoming far too big, and this was also a conversation in the primaries in the US, and I think slowly we start hearing more and more voices speaking up against these monopolies, like these new forms of like monarchies that we have, monarchies that are not voted. We do not really get to decide who is in charge and who makes the rules, and it's like this little hub of powerful white men mostly coding, and I think slowly we're starting to understand that this ultimately hinders everyone's form of individuation and agency. It's even if you feel like you don't care so much, like this is something that affects you, and it's shaping your life, it's affecting your decisions, who you talk to. So I think it is important that we start taking agency, and as artists I think we also care a lot about this. I mean, artists struggle so much, like these days, to reach out to potential hires or followers or audiences,
To
and
get paid work.
exactly, to get paid, and all of a sudden the only vehicle that you have to communicate with your audiences and employers is a platform that ultimately has a lot of power over how you look and what you say, and how you're perceived, and all these algorithms that also get to decide who gets to be seen or not. Like if you put a selfie, you'll get more views and more likes than if you post something regarding context. So it's like this idea that there's a very strong shift to kind of like performativity over content, and content is kind of like degrading, and people are just posting things that they feel that will get some traction. Like this is already shaping how we talk with one another.
Yeah, I can add something also that I mean, it's also all about like the Facebook and Instagram and etc. They have so much data about us, and they can do kind of what they want with this data, and they have all this intimate knowledge of billions of people across the world. And I think like what the power that gives them is terrifying. And also when it comes to like how these apps are so addictive, like Instagram, you basically have to go on it every single day to see stories. Otherwise, you don't know what's happening. And Queer House is also trying to move away from that. Like, we're not trying to be addictive. We're trying to build something different, something more human. I would say.
There's some features, like maybe we can talk about the features like already, and we already tackled that. Like,
sure. Yeah.
No lights, no.
Yeah. So exactly. Yeah, we're like Instagram is doing now. Finally, after so many years, the like count of posts on Queer House is already being hidden, and we are also working to automatically delete old posts, so you will be able to choose yourself. It's like, okay, all of my posts should be deleted after half a year or a month, so that data doesn't grow endlessly and just are not collected for no reason.
And do you collect data?
I mean, we collect data in terms of being able to show posts to other users, of course, but we have no analytics, we have no like marketing, no ads, nothing of that sort. So only the very basic data needed to provide a service that is like showing your profile and posts to other users. Yeah.
And the optimization or the changes that are done in the platform are mostly suggested by people in the community. So it's kind of like a peer-to-peer growth rather than someone running an algorithm that analyzes this big data and stating we need to have so-and-so working in this way. It's like it's not decided over the information that an algorithm tells us, but basically based on the needs and desires of the people that use the platform.
Sounds amazing.
One more feature, sorry. Since just a few days, you can now, all of our users can invite more users, so that everyone gets one invite per week to invite your friends. Because until now, it's always been us in the core team that have been inviting people, and now we want to start growing even more organically. Yeah.
And the Open Collective, and I think then we present.
Oh, then we have done everything. Yeah, sure.
We have nothing left to talk about.
So we need all kinds of help to keep this project going. We would really appreciate donations, and thank you everyone who is already donating. It's really helping us to pay server costs and also do these kinds of events and pay the people that work here for them.
This one. Yours is not so good.
Okay.
Yeah, so and if anyone would like to help out, if there are any queer hackers out there, please reach out. We would love some more technical help, and also all kinds of other help, like community building, everything. So yeah, there should be a link in the description of the YouTube. Otherwise, just go to queer.house and you can read all about us.
Thank you so much. I do have a bunch more questions. I'm really curious, but I would like to ask also some information from Adelaida to keep the conversation moving between us. Yeah, so first, Adelaida, I would love to hear a bit about your personal history. How did you get into organizing? Yeah, maybe start with that, and then maybe you can go into like what is Right to the City and how did that come about?
Yeah, I come from a family in northeast Brazil, which is already like the leftist part of Brazil, where Bolsonaro lost. And yes, my father was in Recife.
Yeah, exactly.
My father comes from an anarchist tradition, and my mother was also active during her school years, and they've been very involved in politics since forever. My grandfather was a family agriculture, I don't know how to translate this to English, but also involved in politics and political and community organizing. So it's there already. And then when I started going to school, was later teenage years. We had zines and we did like actions. It was in the 90s in Brazil, which was very neoliberal. It was fucked up situation. And yeah, and then like I've been in different contexts of organizing throughout the years, And then when my visa situation was finally stabilized in Germany, then I affiliated in the party, in the Linke, because I think this is what you do. And I'm also affiliated in another political party in Brazil. And there I started to get to know more about the campaign, Deutsche Wohnen and Co Enteignen. And I started collecting signatures already in the first phase through the party, the Linke, like in the basis organization of my neighborhood. This is how I got contact about what is it about, what is it for. It was very hard for me in the beginning because of not only I can speak relatively good German, but it's another world of words. You know, it's like a completely another vocabulary. What is Vergesellschaftung? What is, you know, all those words super long about like the history of the constitution of Germany came also in the story. But with time you get used to it, and then at some point the AG Stadthilfe, the working group Stadthilfe, which is one of the working groups of the campaign, is focused in community organizing tenants to build their own tenants organizations. They noticed like how in a city like Berlin, with almost a fourth of its population doesn't have a German pass, but we were underrepresented in the campaign, so they started working around that. And this is when I came in, joined the Stadthilfe first 1 year ago, and then we started conceptualizing what a working group for people living without German passport should look like and had to have. What should be the goals, what should be like, how to work from there. And then, yeah, the Right to the City was born more or less 1 year ago already. It was a long process until we finally created it in December last year, so it's very young, it's a baby.
That's so cool. And so is there anything else we need to know about Right to the City? Is it all migrants or like people with migrant history, or?
Very good question. Yeah, it's people with migration histories, people that just arrived, people who lived here for thousands of years. I have the feeling that I live here for thousands of years. It's going to be 11 years, and I feel like 1,000, but it never gets boring also. But we also have people who are interested in the topic of right to the city and voting rights and right to have a house, to have a roof over your head, and interested in expropriating and creating a new type of relationship between tenants and the buildings that we live in, that it's not like landlord-tenant, but it's democratically verwaltet, democratically administrated. So everything, like we try to envision all that's possible, also because after the Vergesellschaftung, after the socialization, how we're going to share these flats, these apartments and these buildings? Are we going to reproduce the same type of racial profiling that we have right now in the regular market? Of course not. So we also have to imagine that, and this is very exciting actually, like to avoid discrimination against people without German passport, but also people who have migrants backgrounds of all different sorts, queer people, single parents, people who have different religions than Christian religion. So it's actually quite beautiful. Sounds beautiful, and we're trying to create a beautiful city.
And just like I feel like maybe we've skipped a step because we are so, you know, like surrounded by so much Deutsche Wohnen and Co Enteignen.
Yeah.
It's like for the people that are at home, like what are exactly, and what are we doing, and also like maybe like highlight the difference, because I feel like when we're collecting signatures, one of the big struggles is like people kind of like stop immediately with the expropriation, and sometimes we talk about socialization as you were talking. Maybe just to explain a little bit.
Okay, so the campaign Deutsche Wohnen und Co Enteignen is based on Article 15 of the German Grundgesetz, of the Constitution, of the Basic Law actually. It's a beautiful article that was created right after the war in 1945. And it talks about the possibility of expropriating land, natural resources, which, you know, we can all, it's important to argue about it, but land and means of production, they can be expropriated through some type of compensation. And the type of compensation is also discussed in this Grundgesetz. So it's totally legal. It's totally based on people who've been organizing tenants throughout the last years, who also have deep knowledge about German law and German right. So that's very interesting what you ask, because a lot of people, and while you were talking about queer house, I had the feeling that if we exchange the word queer house from Deutsche Wohnen, Co Enteignen, it would fit perfectly sometimes, because a lot of people ask like, well, but our enemy is so big. What do you think you're going to change? And it's like, well, it's a lot of people. Berlin has 80% of tenants. So it's a lot of people that want to live better. So that's the possibility of first expropriating legally, paying a compensation. It's not some, and that's the thing about the word radical. Some people say we are too radical because we want to expropriate. And other people say it's not radical enough because you want to pay people, you want to pay the landlord's money. But if we think of radical in a sense that we're trying to change things by the roots, then it is radical, because we saw what regulation does. Mietendeckel was kicked out. Was a chance to regulate, but this system doesn't regulate itself, or doesn't let that we regulate it. So we need another type of how we organize housing. So first expropriate, pay these people they don't deserve any money, they don't need our money because it's BlackRock. Like, they don't need 8 billion euros or 18 billions depending on the calculation. But you know, we pay them through rent, very low rent. So the calculation is more or less €5 per square meter, which is like none of us pay this right now anymore. So first we expropriate, we pay them the money, and we socialize in the sense that it doesn't belong to the state either, because the state, and it's also a little bit related to what you said about queer house, the laws changes and all of a sudden you're kicked out of the platform. So if we socialize in the sense that it belongs to the state, if the government that's elected is a right-wing one, they're going to sell the socialized houses again. So it doesn't belong to the state also. So Vergesellschaftung is not exactly socializing, it's like making it belong to the commons, to the people who live in Berlin, and that we verwalten das, that we administer this ourselves. And it's all possible, it's all legal, and it's happening, actually.
And so who are we expropriating? Is it every landlord?
No, we're not expropriating every landlord. We are also not, this is so important, we are also not expropriating the Baugenossenschaften. No, we are expropriating companies who are profit-oriented, who have more than 3,000 apartments in Berlin. So, you know, you're a small landlord, you have 20 flats, don't worry, we're not coming for you. Some would say we're not coming for you yet, but you know, we're not coming for you. It's like 3,000 apartments plus. We're talking here about, like, BlackRock. Oh my God, I don't even know what to say. It's like big sharks. This word. And also not the Baugenossenschaften, because they have a totally another way of also relating to tenants and how they see housing.
Yeah, as I understood it, the profits that are going from all of the houses that would be expropriated, none of those are actually, like, the shareholders are even in Berlin, right? They're all offshore, they're not paying taxes on this, all of this kind of nasty stuff.
So the money that we pay from our very small salaries are going completely somewhere else. They don't stay in the city, they are not invested in the city. So this is something also that when we are collecting in the streets, we hear a lot like, well, why not build? And it's like, well, but why build if the new buildings are still going to be handled like profit oriented. So it's actually expropriating and socializing is not because we're against building. It's actually because it's impossible to build right now, and it be fair still. If you think like in the last, well, I'm afraid to say numbers because then I'm always wrong with numbers, but the price of the rents tripled in the last years, but our salaries just get smaller and smaller, and after COVID, who has a salary? I mean, raise your hands, because I don't. Well, now I do since 2 weeks. God sei Dank.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're making me laugh and forget all my questions.
Oh,
No, I guess laughter is a good part of it. I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask about this, actually. I mean, there's some of the opposition that I was hearing when I was collecting signatures, for example, was that people don't agree with the strategy, and like you mentioned about the building, which is a very good point. But also maybe you can clarify, because I also, as I understood it, actually when these housing is socialized, then it will actually potentiate more building to happen, because at the moment these big corporate landlords are not building anything. They're just like buying up everything cheaply. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the case. For example, like I was recently visiting a friend who lives in a Deutsche Wohnen flat. So she's a Deutsche Wohnen tenant. She's also from Brazil, and they didn't build it. It was a social housing that was built years ago. We had a government that decided to sell it, which was a leftist coalition actually. And now, not only, I mean, they didn't make the investment, but now they're living off the profit of. And if you go around the Deutsche Wohnen blocks, you're going to see that there's a lot of people who live there, who live in extremely precarious situations, not only because Deutsche Wohnen doesn't care about the flats, but also because if you think of how people with migrant histories here live here, we get paid more or less 18% less. When we get a registered job, we never find flats, etc. So you know all the problems already. So those big companies, they profit from our salaries and the hard lives that we have, but they don't invest back in the city. They put their money in some paradise, in some paraíso fiscal in Portuguese, and the money goes away. Money that could go for building more kindergartens, money that could be for new public libraries, money that could go for for us. We live here. They don't care actually.
And something else is also getting stuff fixed in your house. I think that's like a big problem that comes up again and again if you're a tenant in Berlin and living with one of these nasty companies, which I used to, just like things not getting fixed, and you kind of have to then organize with your neighbors to withhold rent to even get a simple thing fixed. Whereas if they're going to come under public ownership, it's in our interest to take care of these places.
Exactly.
And yeah, because it's ours. So, and we also have local people. Yeah. Maybe I jump back to a question here before I have. It's a difficult thing because I want to like dig more into
Well, I
everyone.
think there's so much in common. Like everything that we were saying before is like, oh my god, it's exactly the same fight. It's exactly the same fight.
So what you've told about Queer House so far is super interesting. I'm sold. I mean, I'm actually already on Queer House. But if I wasn't, I would be sold already from this call.
Exactly.
And I'm sure our listeners at home are also sold. And so if they want to get involved, is that possible? Can anyone join? How do you join? Or like Pedro was mentioning, if they want to build their own network, how does that happen? Because I feel like you made it sound simple, but building a social network doesn't sound simple.
It takes some work. But first, if you want to join Queer House, in the description of this video, there should be a link to our open collective where we collect donations, and you can clearly see where all of our funds go, what we pay for. And there is currently also an invite link there. So usually we have no public sign up on Queer House because we want to keep it small. We don't want to invite everyone, every random person. So you need to know someone to get in. But currently we have this invite link open for all of you to check it out.
Yeah. I can maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Or this one. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. That's true. Yeah, but I think like and following like this issue that we've been talking like about the battles being somehow tied together, I think that's definitely what brings us here today. Is oftentimes people might wonder like, what does this have to do with like DJing or electronic music, or why are we even like mobilized and talking with one another? But one of the things that we've also been experiencing over the past years, but like drastically over the past year, is also how this city is also changing at a very rapid pace. Not only because of tech capitalism, but also because real estate speculation. So it seems that like basically we see the same patterns happening in the online, where we have like big companies kind of like just devouring everything that exists and not even allowing any form of like competition and other forms of like subjectivities and pluralities like to exist, be it like different social medias with different like forms of operating under different ethics and values. But the same is happening with the housing market, you know, that actually sometimes like the small landlords are afraid of Deutsche Wohnen Co Enteignen, but this is like even the small landlords should be afraid, because this is something that eventually will it will engulf like completely the city, and like people will be completely in panic to pay their rents. And we've seen this happening over the Easter, you know. It happened in New York, it happened in Paris, it happened in London, and we know that this leads to actually like a degradation of also like the social and network, and the community tissue starts suffering, and also like the arts and cultural field starts suffering, you know. Like Berlin has been kind of a haven for a lot of artists and cultural makers, because it allowed you to actually pay a rent that was affordable, and maybe you had like a small side job, or even you could make a little bit of money with your work and pay the rent, and still invest a lot of your time in social, community, artistic, political work. And this is like coming to an end, you know. Like this Berlin,
It's over.
yeah, exactly. Like oftentimes like Berlin is still sold like, you know, poor but sexy. I don't think it is anymore. Like if you want to live like 15 kilometers away from the center, maybe you can still find something affordable, but it is getting very, very hard. So I think these battles are really important to kind of like unify and raise voice one another. And also we've been seeing clubs that are disappearing, and they're disappearing also due to the pressure of like big real estate corporations. And soon we will be wondering, where can we actually organize parties? Where can we actually listen to music without having as a gatekeeper some like Google mogul? I was just hearing like this awful story. I don't even know if I should share this, but like someone that went to a house party of someone that works in one big tech company here in Berlin. And you know, like this person literally had bought like the lights of Chris Mühle and is like paid to have like artists that this person loves in their house or in their kitchen, or like looking like a club. And you realize these are going to be like the clubs of the future.
Oh
like
God.
some nasty ass rich dude that like loves clubbing and probably has bought an harness, and now is buying like the artifacts of the clubs to have it in their private space, and then they're the only ones who can afford to pay artists. And so these will be like the future curators. It's like I cannot think of a more dystopian scene for the arts, is when we actually lose agency over like who gets to play, and you know, like what we think of a scene that is like diverse and plural and, you know, community focused. It will stop like as and it's it's awful.
The privatization of clubbing sounds like the bleakest and saddest thing. Yeah, that's very true.
I have one more thing to add about your question about how to build your own. Queerhouse is all built on open source software that already exists. We are modifying it, theming it, making it look nice, trying to make it easier to use, putting in a lot of work. But all of this can also be set up by other communities around the world and are already being done so. So the main one that we're using is Mastodon. So you can go to joinmastodon.org and check out all of the communities that already exist. There's like 3 million users out there. So we are a part of this network, of one small part of this network. And the way that I usually explain how it works is that if you have Twitter and I have Facebook, there's no way that I can contact you. Like they're completely isolated corporate silos of data. But if you have Hotmail and I have Gmail, I can still send you an email because it's based on a common standard that was created in like the 70s. It's been around since forever. And this is what Mastodon and Queerhouse is a part of. So it's a common standard. So anyone can create their own social media, and you can follow people, you can post things, you can repost, and we don't have to exist in the same network. So every community can create their own website, their own community with their own moderation rules, and create their own space while still being able to interact in a bigger circle.
And are there like rules or limitations as to which communities you connect
Yeah,
with?
so Queer House works a bit differently in that we are very selective with who we federate with, as it's called, like which other communities that we communicate with. So it's a short list of communities where we either know who is running that website also, or we know that their moderation is good and they have very welcoming queer people there also. So it's we are making an even smaller selection out of the big Fediverse, as it's called, because there's quite a lot of stuff out there that we don't want to take part in also.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's the internet. It's like
It's
things happen.
There's a lot of stuff out there. But I get the impression, actually, or the feeling that the internet is smaller and smaller. I feel like back in the days, I could research and there would be endless stuff. And now, I guess, maybe it's because of the algorithms. The internet gets smaller and smaller. I
Yeah.
get suggested the same things all the time.
I think it's also because the internet is kind of becoming Facebook. The internet is Google. Like, you have these huge centers, centralized data and services. So going from everyone has their own blog, which is decentralized, and everyone can create their own design. You can still follow each other. I mean, that's going away, and everyone has an Instagram or a Twitter or something. So we're trying to also bring it back to that. Everyone can design their own a little bit more. Yeah.
Cool. And jumping back to you, Adelaida, maybe you could tell us a bit about what have Right to the City been up to recently, other than signature collecting, because obviously signature collecting is the primary push from Deutsche Wohnen and Co Enteignen, which Right to the City has also been working on. But what is also special about Right to the City?
How many times do we have? 15 minutes. Just to stress that we have 3 weeks less, I think, to collect signatures, and we need to reach a lot of signatures because the calculation is that more or less 30% will be considered invalid because of different reasons, lack of citizenship, which is our big focus, but also lack of Anmeldung, which is a big problem, especially for people with migrant histories. So until the end of June, I think the 22nd of June, we need to make sure that we collect as much signatures as we can. So people out there, join us. Collecting signatures is fun. It's hard work sometimes, but it's fun. We learn a lot about our city, and we also learned a lot about what tenants have been going through. And it's really painful to hear sometimes how people are facing Obdachlosigkeit, homelessness, because of not being able to get a flat. And when you say we're trying to take internet out of Facebook and Google, which is basically now internet, this is what we're trying to do with the city. The Google of the city would be Deutsche Wohnen Vonovia coalition now, and we're trying to no, we decide for ourselves. So we're focusing now in collection because we have 3 weeks to make sure that we're gonna be present in the vote in September, in the Wahl, in the big Wahl, super Wahl, how they say. But to be present, but for Deutsche Wohnen und Co Enteignen to be present in the super Wahl in September, we need to make sure that we have enough signatures. So I'm stressing this again and again. Join us to collect signatures, but also we are debating and organizing also around the lack of democracy in Berlin. Like we said before, more or less 1/4, 22 to 25% of people living here doesn't have a German passport, which means that our signatures are invalid in the referendum, and we are not going to be allowed to vote in September if we make to September. So we are also trying to not only draw attention to that deficit in the democracy in the city level, but also to have serious conversations and push for better imagination of what can we do to make the city more democratic for everybody that lives here and people who've been living here for years. But also we think that people who just arrived 3 months ago have the same right also to participate in all levels of democracy in the city level. So we start imagining, thinking about Berlin as sanctuary city. How can we do this? And it's a lot of work. We are also trying to experiment within the group of how to be a safe space for creative debate, a safe space that people feel that they can shine politically, bringing their ideas, their skills. So for us, it's really important not only that we make an impact in the city, but also that we bring new ideas of how to organize politically, how to do community organizing in a way that everybody feels that they matter, that they're important. And this is actually why Queer House is so important, because it's the feeling like, okay, it's a giant enemy, but we're going to do this because we need to do this. And for us, it's also important to remind that every person who lives in the city is important, and every person present in the political fight is important, because if we don't do this, nothing's going to change. But also, you know, like the tradition of, I see through my father, for example, the tradition of political organizing, community organizing back in the day is it can be very scary for people who just arrive, who never did this before. We have this weird, strange figures that feel super powerful, and it's, you know, we want to change that all. We want to just be like cute with one another while changing everything.
I mean, I can definitely say from my experience being, because I think I was just thinking, I didn't say it in the introduction, but I'm also working with Right to the City since the beginning of the year, and my experience has been, it's very cute. It's the most amazing team, and it's a great way to access activism. So if you're, I mean, I was also like holding out from really joining any proper organization in Germany just because of the language barrier and cultural barrier, but having this opportunity to join Right to the City was a really amazing in, and since me joining, I've also seen many more people getting on board, and it's amazing to see how this migrant group is growing. And it's a great way to feel empowered when you live in a city and in a climate where you feel like everything is against you all the time, and this way you're actually doing something.
Yes.
It's, yeah. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that, and one of the exciting things, it's like, I think, at least for me, like, party organizing and music making has always been also somehow connected with community making and being implicated in the community, and you know, also promoting and elevating not only the values and ethics and excitement of raving, but also create spaces for a lot of like marginal people, and in Lisbon has been like, it's almost like impossible to dissociate, you know, like party making from politics. Of course, like it is possible, but like it is difficult like to not talk about it when you live in a city that is so highly touristified, when it's so hard to find a place to organize a party, when most of the people that would work on the collective had miserable incomes and awfully high like rents. So this was already something that in our scene and like Mina collective, like we would talk already a lot, and it was interesting to see that you can have a party where everyone is to an extent radicalized to talk about something that also unifies them, other than just like, you know, going into the party, getting to know each other and raving, but also using the potential of rave to kind of organize against gentrification or touristification. And when moving to Berlin, it became a bit daunting, like because I don't speak German, because it is a completely different like political tradition. But during the pandemic, you know, so many artists, not just me or you, like so many people actually felt completely lost without the capacity like or the possibility to organize in clubs or in parties and to play music other than in the online world. And I guess that's why, like, for me, Queer House also made a lot of sense, not only because these were things that I was already interested in, but also to think, how can we regain agency over the platforms that we use online? But then over the time, it also made a lot of sense for me, you know, also facing eviction, learning German, but struggling to an extent with Germans, that that would see that they have to a certain extent more entitlement to the city than I would. So I guess like to join Right to the City was also a way for me to heal a lot of wounds, and also to, I don't know, sometimes I think it was so much time that I could have used like for other things, like cultural, artistic things, but ultimately this was also what saved me during the pandemic, because it made me feel definitely more part of the city, to be able to imagine in which ways can we also see party making and community making in this electronic music scene together in the future, and to learn how to organize ourselves at the same time we're partying.
Yeah, I feel like how you're saying in Lisbon, it's kind of the people were already somehow politicized because of their precarious situations. Of course, not everyone, but to a large extent, there was this kind of consciousness of the situation that they were living in and needing to change that somehow. And I think that's something that there's definitely a lot of people like that in Berlin, but it's not everybody. There's still like a lot of people that are quite comfortable. And I think obviously as gentrification progresses in the next years and we see more and more clubs closing, more and more people will kind of be forced to do that move to be a bit political. But it would be amazing to kind of, gently nudge people to feel invited to get into that now and come and collect signatures with us, for example.
Yeah, it's hard when you're like transient in the city, and that's like the city has so many people that are just passing by and do not speak the language. So I think, like as you were saying, right to the city is so welcoming, and it's like, for me, it showed me a different way of like doing politics that accommodates, of course, like you need to speak English, but then we also have so many people translating and making sure that materials are available, reaching out to people from other communities of migrants and Berlin tenants. So yeah, it's really beautiful to see that it is a way of democratizing democracy, because democracy doesn't seem like democracy doesn't feel very democratic when you don't have a right to vote, when you don't know, when you cannot read what is being talked about.
Well, it's not a democracy anymore if you have 22% to 25%, a quarter of the population that are not implicated. That's not technically democracy in my understanding of the word. I'm a bit conscious of time. No, make your closing.
We have 5
comment.
minutes. I was going to say that I guess the same happens exactly with social media, and that even like during the pandemic, we've done so many streams, but then we started realizing that we were bound to certain platforms such as YouTube and Twitch, and then you go and see who's behind these platforms. Google and Facebook, and Twitch is from Amazon, and then people started also getting their DJ streams being pulled offline, because they played a track and they didn't have the copyrights, and then you realize, oh, the internet is not a free place as I imagined, where I just do a DJ stream and I have it online. Like there's a nipple, it gets turned down. There's like a certain word, it gets turned down. There's a track that you've played, you even paid for it, but somehow like the copyrights are not covered. So I guess I see like these battles are kind of like the same, but one operates in the physical realm and the other operates in the online realm, and we inhabit both these days. So we need to really think how to find ways to avoid getting evicted of both.
Yeah, this is a really good point. Maybe just in the closing comments, Babs, would you like to maybe take a moment to reiterate how can people help with Queer House? Because I think maybe a bit about the Open Collective and how can people help, basically, if they're sold on everything so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a link to the Open Collective donation page in the YouTube video. And we are a non-profit. All of our expenses are completely public there. You can see everything. And we would really appreciate any donation that you can make. $2, anything is welcome. €2, I mean. And it helps us to pay for our servers and to organize events like this, and maybe even bigger events, workshops in the future when we can actually be more people together. That would be amazing. To also educate more about how to do these things, how to start your own community, how to build these things in the future. Yeah.
And is it true that you have a non-cis system admin position open? Something like that?
I mean, we're looking for any kind of developer sysadmin, non-cis sysadmin, anyone that knows tech or want to help out, you're very welcome to reach out to us. We have an email on the Open Collective page also, I think. Yeah.
We also have a link for Deutsche Wohnen.
Perfect.
2 minutes. Okay, so right to the city. meets every second Wednesday. We're gonna meet. Now I'm looking at the camera like we're meeting again next Wednesday. We are now planning the last actions regarding collection, but we are also planning what's gonna happen between June and September, like election campaigning for the socialization vote. So join us. For you to join us, you go to dwenteignen.de/mitmachen. Entschuldigung, I'm sorry. You put a. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm 40. Forgive me. You're talking about the internet stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I think I understand. So we meet every second Wednesday. We need everybody. We welcome everybody. If you would like to be active, like if you feel comfortable with speaking German and would like to be active in your own neighborhood, you can also join kids teams, which is also great. Focused on collecting. Yeah, and we're nice and we're great, but not only we're nice and great and cute, but we're really trying to change the city for the better.
Yeah, our working group is definitely the best. And maybe a little intersection with the queer community who may be watching because of Queer House. We also have a small LGBTQIA+ task force that are also doing signature collecting. So if you don't feel so comfortable, yeah, you can also come collect with us, bunch of queers. Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining. The program is not finished, so don't turn off your computer just yet if you're watching from home. We have 2 hours of music. We have Yaz coming up next, and then Maroon will play for us a DJ set, so I think they have about each 1 hour. So stay where you are. Keep watching. Get a drink. Yeah, PP Pausa. Donate, exactly. Just like hit the link, donate all your extra cash that you've saved on not having to go out on a Monday night, and stay with us for some music. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.